Hello. Before we begin, a quick note. The Bore You to Sleep podcast relies on you and sponsors, which means you will hear a quick advertisement before the beginning of tonight's episode. While the podcast is free, you are welcome to subscribe for just $2.99 per month, which supports the creation of this podcast and gives you an ad-free listening experience. Simply click the link in the show notes from your podcast app. Rest easy.
With Amex Platinum, you can enjoy access to dedicated card member entrances at select events because skipping the line makes you the star of game day. That's the powerful backing of American Express. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/withAmex. Card member entrance access not limited to Amex Platinum Card.
Hello. Welcome to the Bore You to Sleep podcast. The podcast that will hopefully help you get to sleep. I am going to read an open source book, one that is not particularly interesting, but one that is hopefully boring enough to get you to sleep. Tonight's reading comes from First Through the Grand Canyon. Written by John Wesley Powell, this story looks at his 1869 to 1870 journeys into the Grand Canyon and his pioneer exploration of the Colorado River. My name is Teddy, and I aim to help people everywhere get a good night's rest. Sleep is so important, and my mission is to help you get the rest that you need. The podcast is designed to play in the background while you slowly fall asleep. For those new to the podcast, it started from my own struggles with sleep. I wanted to create a resource for others facing similar challenges, and I'm so grateful for the amazing community we've built together. This podcast is self-made and self-produced, which is why you'll hear a short ad at the beginning of each episode. These ads, along with support from subscribers and patrons, enable me to keep delivering this podcast for free to those who need it. Thank you to everyone who shared their words of gratitude with me during the week, whether through the website or your podcast app. Your messages mean the world to me. Of course, a massive thank you goes to the patrons on Patreon. Your monthly subscriptions allow me to continue producing more episodes. Without your support, this would not be possible. As I mentioned, my goal is to keep this podcast free and accessible to everyone. That is why you hear this short ad at the beginning of each episode. It helps generate financial support for the creation of the podcast. If you find the podcast beneficial and would like to support it, there are a few ways you can contribute. Follow the podcast in your app and leave a comment. You can also become a subscriber for $2.99 per month, simply by clicking on the link in the show notes. This, of course, helps support episode creation, as well as removing the ads at the beginning of each episode. If subscribing is not possible, an easy way to help is simply by leaving a review and rating in your podcast app. Even one sentence really helps out. I love hearing from listeners of the podcast. If you'd like to say hello to me, you can do that at boreyouTosleep.com. And you're also welcome to share the podcast with a friend who may also be in need of a good night's rest. In the meantime, lie back, relax, and enjoy the readings. First Through the Grand Canyon by John Wesley Powell. Introduction. The Colorado River of the West is formed in southeastern Utah by the junction of the Grand and Green Rivers. For hundreds of miles, it flows through a series of profound chasms, in many places from 4,000 to 6,000 feet deep, and rising nearly vertically for a considerable distance above the water. These canyons are from 1 to 15 miles wide at the top. The most famous of them is the Marble Grand Canyon, really continuous, although it goes under two names, the Marble and the Grand. Through this vast gorge, the Colorado drops 2,330 feet in 283 miles, the current sometimes attaining a velocity of 25 miles an hour. The river itself varies in width from 75 feet to a quarter of a mile. In the narrowest places, it has at times a depth of over 100 feet. Up to 1869, practically nothing was known of the Colorado River, from its source to where it emerges into the valley of the Grand Wash, except what could be observed from lookout points at the tops of the canyons, or from the few places where descents had been made to the bottom. It was a river of mystery and fear. For long distances, it was supposed to flow underground. There was no evidence that any human being had ever passed through the canyons and come out alive. The Indians who lived in the neighborhood considered such a feat preposterous. Then came a scientist and a man of nerve, Major John Wesley Powell, who studied the river carefully at several points along its bank, and calmly decided to risk his life in clearing up the mystery by navigating the stream clear through to the wash. The undertaking was all the more remarkable from the fact that Powell had only one arm. He had lost his right arm at the Battle of Shiloh. His plucky young wife, to whom he had been married but a month, was present at headquarters when he was wounded, and promptly offered herself as a substitute for the missing limb so that her husband could continue in service. She then and there enlisted, and General Grant gave her a perpetual pass to follow the army in the capacity she had chosen. With this help, Major Powell continued in active service to the close of the war. In his student days, Powell had made a specialty of what was then called natural history. When the war was over, he accepted a professorship of geology in the Illinois Wesleyan University, and later held a similar chair in the Illinois Normal University. In the summer of 1867, he initiated the practice of student field work by taking his class to the mountains of Colorado for geological exploration. It was on this trip that he formed the idea of exploring the canyons of the Colorado River of the West. Having obtained funds from public institutions of Illinois to outfit his little expedition, he started from Green River City, above the head of the Colorado proper, May 24th, 1869, on one of the most hazardous adventures in the history of exploration. He emerged from the Grand Canyon on August 29, with 5 of the 9 men he had started with. 4 had deserted on the way, and 3 of these were killed by natives. Major Powell's reports on the first exploration of the Colorado River was published by the Smithsonian Institute of 1875. Together with the scientific data appended, it forms a large quarto volume, which is now out of print. The narrative part is here republished without abridgment. In 1870, Congress established a topographical and geological survey of the Colorado River of the West, and Powell was placed in charge of it. In 1871 to 1872, he made a second descent of the river this time for the government. Again he came through unharmed, proving his mastery of a species of navigation so difficult that many who have tried it in later years have perished in those brawling waters. Much of Powell's attention was given to the American ethnology, and when a Bureau of Ethnology was formed by the government, he was appointed its director. In 1881, he succeeded Clarence King as director of the U.S. Geological Survey. Major Powell died September 23, 1902. The Colorado River is formed by the junction of the Grand and Green. The Grand River has its source in the Rocky Mountains, 5 or 6 miles west of Long's Peak, in latitude 40 degrees 17 minutes, and longitude 105 degrees 43 minutes approximately. A group of little alpine lakes that receive their waters directly from perpetual snowbanks discharge into a common reservoir known as Grand Lake, a beautiful sheet of water. Its quiet surface reflects towering cliffs and crags of granite on its eastern shore, and stately pines and firs stand on its western margin. The Green River heads near Fremont's Peak in the Wind River Mountains, in latitude 43 degrees 15 minutes and longitude 109 degrees 45 minutes approximately. This river, like the last, has its sources in alpine lakes, fed by everlasting snows. Thousands of these little lakes, with deep cold emerald waters, are embosomed among the crags of the Rocky Mountains. These streams, born in the cold, gloomy solitudes of the upper mountain region, have a strange, eventful history as they pass down through gorges, tumbling in cascades and cataracts, until they reach the hot, arid plains of the lower Colorado, where the waters that were so clear, above empty, as turbid floods into the Gulf of California. The mouth of the Colorado is in latitude 31 degrees and 53 minutes, and longitude 115 degrees. The Green River is larger than the Grand, and is the upper continuation of the Colorado. Including this river, the whole length of the stream is about 2,000 miles. The region of country drained by the Colorado and its tributaries is about 800 miles in length, and varies from 300 to 500 in width, containing about 300,000 square miles, an area larger than all the New England and Middle States and Maryland and Virginia added, or as large as Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, and Missouri. There are 2 distinct portions of the basin of the Colorado. The lower third is but little above the sea, though here and there ranges of mountains rise to an altitude of from 2,000 to 6,000 feet. This part of the valley is bounded on the north by a line of cliffs that present a bold, often vertical step, hundreds or thousands of feet to the tablelands above. The upper 2/3 of the basin rises from 4,000 to 8,000 feet above the level of the sea. This high region on the east, north, and west is set with ranges of snow-clad mountains, attaining an altitude above the sea varying from 8,000 to 14,000 feet. All winter long, on its mountain-crested rim, snow falls filling the gorges, half burying the forests and covering the crags and peaks with a mantle woven by the winds from the waves of the sea, a mantle of snow. When the summer sun comes, This snow melts and tumbles down the mountain sides in millions of cascades. 10 million cascade brooks unite to form 10,000 torrent creeks. 10,000 torrent creeks unite to form 100 rivers beset with cataracts. 100 roaring rivers unite to form the Colorado, which rolls a mad, turbid stream into the Gulf of California. Consider the action of one of these streams, its source in the mountains, where the snows fall, its course through the arid plains. Now if at the river's flood storms were falling on the plains, its channel would be cut but little faster than the adjacent country would be washed, and the general level would thus be preserved. But under the conditions here mentioned, the river deepens its bed, as there is much through corrosion and but little lateral degradation. So all the streams cut deeper and still deeper, until their banks are towering cliffs of solid rock. These deep, narrow gorges are called canyons. For more than 1,000 miles along its course, the Colorado has cut for itself such a canyon. But at some few points, these lateral streams join it. The canyon is broken, and narrow, transverse valleys divide it properly into a series of canyons. The Virgin, Kanab, Paria, Escalante, Dirty Devil, San Rafael, Price, and Uinta on the west, the Grand, Yampa, San Juan, and Colorado Chiquito on the east, have also cut for themselves such narrow, winding gorges or deep canyons. Every river entering these has cut another canyon. Every lateral creek has cut a canyon. Every brook runs in a canyon, every rill born of a shower, and born again of a shower, and living only during these showers, has cut for itself a canyon, so that the whole upper portion of the basin of the Colorado is traversed by a labyrinth of these deep gorges. Owing to a great variety of geological conditions, these canyons differ much in general aspect. The Rio Virgin, between Long Valley and the Mormon town of Schöneberg, runs through Paranaweap Canyon, often not more than 20 or 30 feet in width, and from 600 to 1,500 feet deep. Away to the north, the Yampa empties into the green by a canyon that I essayed to cross in the fall of 1868, and was baffled from day to day until the 4th had nearly passed before I could find my way down to the river. But 30 miles above its mouth, this canyon ends, and a narrow valley with a flood plain is found. Still farther upstream, the river comes down through another canyon, and beyond that a narrow valley is found, and its upper course is now through a canyon, and now a valley. All these canyons are alike changeable in their topographic characteristics. The longest canyon through which the Colorado runs is that between the mouth of the Colorado Chiquito and the Grand Wash, a distance of 217.5 miles, but this is separated from another above, 65.5 miles in length, only by the narrow canyon valley of the Colorado Chiquito. All the scenic features of this canyon land are on a giant scale, strange and weird. The streams run at depths almost inaccessible, lashing the rocks which beset their channels, rolling in rapids and plunging in falls, and making a wild music which but adds to the gloom of the solitude. The little valleys nestling along the streams are diversified by bordering willows, clumps of box elder, and small groves of cottonwood. Low mesas, dry and treeless, stretch back from the brink of the canyon, often showing smooth surfaces of naked, solid rock. In some places, the country rock being composed of marls, the surface is a bed of loose, disintegrated material, and you walk through it as in a bed of ashes. Often these marls are richly coloured and varied. In other places, the country rock is a loose sandstone, the disintegration of which has left broad stretches of drifting sand, white, golden, and vermilion. Where this sandstone is a conglomerate, a paving of pebbles has been left, a mosaic of many colours, polished by the drifting sands and glistening in the sunlight. After the canyons, the most remarkable features of the country are the long lines of cliffs. These are bold escarpments, often hundreds or thousands of feet in altitude, great geographic steps, scores or hundreds of miles in length, presenting steep faces of rock, often quite vertical. Having climbed one of these steps, you may descend by a gentle, sometimes imperceptible slope to the foot of another. They will thus present a series of terraces, the steps of which are well defined escarpments of rock. The lateral extension of such a line of cliffs is usually very irregular. Sharp salients are projected on the plains below, and deep recesses are cut into the terraces above. Intermittent streams coming down the cliffs have cut many canyons or canyon valleys, by which the traveller may pass from the plain below to the terrace above. By these gigantic stairways you may ascend to high plateaus, covered with forests of pine and fir. The region is further diversified by short ranges of eruptive mountains, a vast system of fissures, huge cracks in the rocks to the depths below, extends across the country. From the crevices, floods of lava have poured, covering mesas and tablelands with sheets of black basalt. The expiring energies of these volcanic agencies have piled up huge cinder cones that stand along the fissures, red, brown, and black, naked of vegetation, and conspicuous landmarks set as they are, in contrast to the bright, variegated rocks of sedimentary origin. These canyon gorges, obstructing cliffs and desert wastes, have prevented the traveller from penetrating the country, so that, until the Colorado River exploring expedition was organized, it was almost unknown. Yet enough had been seen to foment rumor, and many wonderful stories have been told in the hunter's cabin and prospector's camp. Stories were related of parties entering the gorge in boats and being carried down with fearful velocity into whirlpools, where all were overwhelmed in the abyss of waters, others of underground passages for the great river, into which boats had passed never to be seen again. It was currently believed that the river was lost under the rocks for several hundred miles. There were other accounts of great falls, whose roaring music could be heard on the distant mountain summits. There were many stories current of parties wandering on the brink of the canyon, vainly endeavouring to reach the waters below, and perishing with thirst at last in sight of the river, which was roaring its mockery into dying ears. The Indians, too, have woven the mysteries of the canyons into the myths of their religion. Long ago, there was a great and wise chief who mourned the death of his wife, and would not be comforted until Tawat's, one of the Indian gods, came to him and told him that she was happier in a land, and often to take him there, that he might see for himself if, upon his return, he would cease to mourn. The great chief promised. Then Tawat's made a trail through the mountains that intervene between that beautiful land and this, the desert home of the poor Numa. This trail was the canyon gorge of Colorado. Through it he led him, and when they had returned, the deity exacted from the chief a promise that he would tell no one of the joys of that land, lest through discontent with the circumstances of this world, they should desire to go to heaven. Then he rolled a river into the gorge, a mad, raging stream, that should engulf any that might attempt to enter thereby. More than once I have been warned by the Indians not to enter this canyon. They considered it disobedience to the gods and contempt for their authority, and believed that it would surely bring upon me their wrath. For 2 years previous to the exploration, I had been making some geological studies among the heads of the canyons, leading to the Colorado, and a desire to explore the Grand Canyon itself grew upon me. Early in the spring of 1869, a small party was organized for this purpose. Boats were built in Chicago and transported by rail to the point where the Union Pacific Railroad crosses the Green River. With these we were set to descend the Green into the Colorado, and the Colorado down to the foot of the Grand Canyon. Chapter 2. From Green River City to Flaming Gorge. May 24, 1869. The good people of Green River City turn out to see us start. We raise our little flag, push the boats from shore, and the swift current carries us down. Our boats are 4 in number. 3 are built of oak, stanch and firm, double-ribbed with double stem and stern posts, and further strengthened by bulkheads dividing each into 3 compartments. 2 of these, the fore and aft, are decked, forming watertight cabins. It is expected these will buoy the boats should the waves roll over them in rough water. These little vessels are 21 feet long, and taking out the cargoes can be carried by 4 men. The 4th boat is made of pine, very light but 16 feet in length, with a sharp cut water, and every way built for fast rowing, and divided into compartments as the others. We take with us rations deemed sufficient to last 10 months, for we expect when winter comes on and the river is filled with ice, to lie over at some point until spring arrives. So we take with us abundant supplies of clothing. We have also a large quantity of ammunition and 2 or 3 dozen traps, for the purpose of building cabins, repairing boats, and meeting other exigencies. We are supplied with axes, hammers, saws, augers, and other tools, and a quantity of nails and screws. For scientific work, we have 2 sextants, 4 chronometers, a number of barometers, thermometers, compasses, and other instruments. The flour is divided into 3 equal parts. the meat and all other articles of our rations in the same way. Each of the larger boats has an axe, hammer, saw, auger, and other tools, so that all are loaded alike. We distribute the cargoes in this way, that we may not be entirely destitute of some important article, should any of the boats be lost. In the small boat, we pack a part of the scientific instruments, 3 guns, and 3 small bundles of clothing only. In this I proceed in advance to explore the channel. J.C. Sumner and William H. Dunn are my boatmen in the Emmerdine. Then follows Kitty Clyde's sister, manned by W. H. Powell and G. White Bradley. Next the No Name with O. G. Howland, Seneca Howland, and Frank Goodman. And last comes the Maid of the Canyon, with W. R. Hawkins and Andrew Hall. Our boats are heavily loaded, and only with the utmost care is it possible to float in the rough river without shipping water. A mile or 2 below town, we run on a sandbar. The men jump into the stream and thus lighten the vessels, so that they drift over, and on we go. In trying to avoid a rock, an oar is broken on one of the boats, and thus crippled, she strikes. The current is swift, and she is sent reeling and rocking into the eddy. In the confusion, 2 others are lost overboard, and the men seem quite discomfited, much to the amusement of the other members of the party. Catching the oars and starting again, the boats are once more borne down the stream until we land at a small cottonwood grove on the bank, and camp for noon. During the afternoon, we run down to a point where the river sweeps the foot of an overhanging cliff, and here we camp for the night. The sun is yet 2 hours high, so I climb the cliffs and walk back among the strangely carved rocks of the Green River Badlands. These are sandstones and shales, grey and buff, red and brown, blue and black strata in many alternations, lying nearly horizontal and almost without soil and vegetation. They are very friable, and the rain and streams have carved them into quaint shapes. Barren desolation is stretched before me, and yet there is a beauty in the scene. The fantastic carving, imitating architectural forms, and suggesting rude but weird statuary, with the bright and varied colours of the rocks, conspire to make a scene such as the dweller in verdure-clad hills can scarcely appreciate. Standing on a high point, I can look off in every direction over a vast landscape with salient rocks and cliffs, glittering in the evening sun. Dark shadows are settling in the valleys and gulches, and the heights are made higher and the depths deeper by the glamour and witchery of light and shade. Away to the south, the Uinta Mountains stretch in a long line, high peaks thrust into the sky, and snowfields glittering like lakes of molten silver, and pine forests in sombre green, and rosy clouds playing around the borders of huge black masses, and heights and clouds, and mountains and snowfields, and forests and rocklands, are blended into one grand view. Now the sun goes down, and I return to camp. We start early this morning, and run along at a good rate until about 9 o'clock, when we are brought up on a gravelly bar. All jump out, and help the boats over by main strength. Then a rain comes on, and river and clouds conspire to give us a thorough drenching. Wet, chilled, and tired to exhaustion, We stop at a cottonwood grove on the bank, build a huge fire, make a cup of coffee, and are soon refreshed and quite merry. When the clouds get out of our sunshine, we start again. A few miles farther down, a flock of mountain sheep are seen on a cliff to the right. The boats are quietly tied up, and 3 or 4 men go after them. In the course of 2 or 3 hours, they return. The cook has been successful in bringing down a fat lamb. The unsuccessful hunters taught him with finding it dead. But it is soon dressed, cooked, and eaten, making a fine 4 o'clock dinner. All aboard and down the river for another 12 miles. On the way we pass the mouth of Black's Fork, a dirty little stream that seems somewhat swollen. Just below its mouth, we land and camp. On the next day, we pass several curiously shaped buttes, standing between the west bank of the river and the high bluffs beyond. These buttes are outliers of the same beds of rocks exposed on the faces of the bluffs, thinly laminated shales and sandstones of many colors, standing above in vertical cliffs and buttressed below with a water-carved talus. Some of them attain an altitude of nearly 1,000 feet above the level of the river. We glide quietly down the placid stream, past the carved cliffs of the Mauvais, now and then obtaining glimpses of distant mountains. After dinner, we pass through a short, narrow canyon into a broad valley. From this, long, lateral valleys stretch back on either side as far as the eye can reach. 2 or 3 miles below, Henry's Fork enters from the right. We land a short distance above the junction where a cache of instruments and rations was made several months ago, in a cave at the foot of the cliff, a distance back from the river. And that concludes tonight's readings. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this story, and I also hope that you're feeling a little drowsy. If you're not quite tired yet, you're always welcome to listen to another episode of the Bore You to Sleep podcast. Until next time, good night.